All right, there we go. There's the music. That means it's time for the show. Some of the best doggone people on the planet. Oh, we're taking it. We're heading out to the wild today. We are taking an adventure, hitting the road, taking a hike. But before we do that, just want to thank everybody for coming along and being part of the show and part of the process. Enjoying having everybody with us. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment wherever fine podcasts are sold, wherever you're listening to it. If you're on the YouTube or the Face Space, whatever it is, just find it, like it, collect it. Oh, there's so many different things. Everybody calls it something different, and something different every time. But we do appreciate people hanging out and taking the time to be with us, because we bring interesting stories and interesting people. And like I said, today we're hitting the trails. We're going to take a hike, and we're going to talk to a chemistry professor, an author, an avid hiker, and we're going to talk all about his novel called The Trail, a novel. And Ethan, I'm going to do this wrong, Gallogly. Yes?
No, that's perfect, Jamie.
All right, Ethan Gallogly. I'm not going to say that again. Ethan, welcome to the show. And thanks for being here. So, Ethan, you're a chemist. You're almost Indiana Jones. You're a professor in an academia, and then you're an adventurer too. So,
I love it. Thanks, Jamie, and thanks for having me on the show. I'm not an archaeologist, though. I don't know anything about archaeology. I mean, I've been down to Machu Picchu, so I've been to ancient civilizations, but
so I got an
not quite Indiana Jones.
I felt like Indiana Jones last week. I got another podcast called Detroit City of Champions, and it's all about 1935. And in 1935, Detroit won their first football championship. It wasn't the Super Bowl yet, but the Lions won that. The Tigers won their first World Series. The Red Wings won their first Stanley Cup, and there were 30 other championships in the city. And one of the big champions in Detroit in that era, in the 30s, in the 20s and the 30s, was this cat named Gar Wood. It was all about boat racing, and it's a phenomenal story. And his boats were called the Miss Americas, and he had they would once the boats were reached they were good for about 2 years, and then they would strip them, tear them apart, and use the parts for the next one. So he had like Miss America 1, 2 through 10. 8, 9, and 10 still exist, and we were trying to figure out where they are. Because it's like, and it's a funny thing about this City of Champions story. It's like so lost. It's this magnificent story, and it's lost. And so we were trying to figure out where the Miss America boats were, the 3 that still exist. And I was like, and I found one, and I felt like, Tom Hanks or Indiana Jones. I'm like,
wow.
Because I messaged my co-host Charles, and I'm like, Charles, I found the Miss America 10. It was like, I felt like I was like, and it was like, and it's at a freaking museum just up the ways here in Metro Detroit. But I found it. So.
That's
the other thing
really
is
cool. I love stories.
If you're ever Googling Miss America 10, because the boats are named with Roman numerals, so if you Google Miss America X,
oh God, I know where this is going.
So it was an interesting afternoon of Googling. I got sidetracked quite a bit. Anyway, but enough about me, Ethan. We want to talk about you and the book and your adventures. But as we get into that, let's go back. Ethan, tell me about your childhood.
My childhood. I grew up on the East Coast,
okay.
Born in New York, grew up in Connecticut, went to high school out there. Did a little camping, did a bike tour, that kind of thing. Went to summer camp and I had a happy childhood. Came out to California for graduate school, actually. And that's where I first hit the mountains. And I was blown away by the scale and just the majesty of the Sierra. Have you been up to Yosemite or the California Sierra at all, Jamie?
I have not. It is. I've been through the Badlands. We've driven through the Badlands. We've driven, through and past the Grand Canyon. Badlands are so much better because you're in it, and the canyon is just so vast. It's like, oh, there's a cliff, and it's just this vastness. It's hard to get the scope unless you're traveling and you get into it. But no, I would love to.
I think for the canyon, you want to raft it. That's what I hear is the best.
Okay.
And that's always been on my list. I haven't done it yet, but my folks did, and they raved about it. The Sierra is like it's on another scale. I mean,
Okay.
I've been to other mountains. I grew up, as I said, on the East Coast. I'd climb Mount Washington and so forth. But when you come out here, it's like just gardens of granite. I mean, it's crazy. The first time I went to Yosemite, it blew my mind just how big and how gorgeous some of these peaks are. And you can see a little bit of it behind me. Actually, I've chosen a background for this. Of let me step aside.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. You got a cool little tent there, and you're in a virtual world someplace.
This is Ray Lakes.
Okay.
It's a famous spot on the John Muir Trail, which is what my book's about. But it's also on the Ray Lake Loops. It's fairly accessible if you want to do a week-long trip. And it's one of the most gorgeous lakes in the Sierra. It's just blue water. You've got Fin Dome there behind me, which Bolton Brown, the explorer, originally envisioned as the fin of a giant dragon. And yeah, that's, let me see if I step aside there, that's my little tent. And
okay,
when you do these long trips,
yeah,
like the one on the JMT where you might be out for a month or so,
wow,
you need really light gear. And so this is actually a very new tent. This is the Durston X-Mid 2, which is, it's under 2 pounds. It sets up with your trekking poles instead of regular poles.
Okay.
It's just super light. And that's part of the key with backpacking is you need to have really, really light gear. And I mean, I messed up on my very first hike on my first trip on the JMT. I was taking 55 pounds with me, but
oh my,
I've learned since.
Yeah. Wow. So what do you do for foodstuffs? Are there stops along the way where you can replenish food, or do you have to take a month worth of food? The dried
Right.
sea rations.
It would be very hard to take a month's worth of food.
Yeah.
The early explorers did. In the early days, there was no place to resupply, and so what they would do typically is bring a mule, and they'd stock it up with about a month's worth of food. And that's how they would make it out there. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, the longest I would carry is about 12 days. I've carried 15 days of food, and it gets real heavy.
Yeah,
a single day of dried food's about 1.5 pounds. So if you're going to take 10 days, that's 15 pounds of extra weight in your back. It gets lighter as you eat it, but it's heavy. Yeah. And in the Sierra, and we'll probably get into bears, you have to carry a bear can. It's a big metal or plastic now cylinder that seals up and protects your food from the bears. And at night, you stick it away from your tent. And if the bears come and play with it, you got to shoo them away. But
hey, bear. Hey, bear. You find yourself saying that, walking through the mall. Hey, bear. Hey,
no, I usually don't do the hey bear thing. A lot of people do. It's kind of interesting. I don't think the bear understands the English. I just wave my trekking poles. I'm like, But
as I run frantically in the other direction. Is running away a bad idea?
No, you never run.
Fair enough.
You shouldn't. I wouldn't say you never do, but that the bear will chase you.
Okay. It's a game. Yay. He's just having fun.
Well, yeah, you want to be dominant in that situation.
Oh, yeah.
Hopefully.
Right. So on the trail, how have you you've encountered bears? Is it a regular occurrence when you do this?
Oh, sure. Yeah, up in the Sierra, bears are pretty common. So
here's my next question: why the hell would you do that?
They're black bears, Jamie. They're not grizzlies or polar bears.
Okay.
I do have friends who go into grizzly country, and they say it's okay. I'm kind of nervous about grizzlies. When I've been in Yellowstone, I carried bear spray, and I was glad not to encounter them. But according to my buddies, if you go through grizzly country and you've got bear bells and you have bear spray and you make enough noise, they usually ignore you.
Usually.
Polar bears, well, your dinner, right? That's another thing.
I'm not sold on the usually it's relatively safe idea.
Well, but black bears are different. Black bears
Yeah.
are big chickens. Unless you are really provoking them, you get into a mother cub situation,
Right.
or you're just stupid. Like you offer them a candy bar or something. So
Let me get a selfie with the bear. Let me.
Exactly.
How many people have died trying to get a selfie with the bear?
No, I've had some really interesting bear encounters.
Yeah.
I talk about some of them in the book. The
Okay.
book is, even though it's a novel, it's based on my experiences hiking and story elements woven together. And in the book, Gil, who's the protagonist, he doesn't really want to be hiking, but he goes. His father died on a hiking trip, and he is invited to go by his father's old hiking buddy and his father's kind of best friend, Sid, who takes him along. And Sid, as it turns out, is dying of cancer. And so there's some question if Sid will survive the hike. But, Gil goes through everything a beginner goes through, right? The food, the bugs, the sunscreen. I mean, and just the pack, and his pack is too heavy. He suffers everything a beginner could imagine.
Right. He shows up naked because he saw the TV show Naked in the woods, and he was like, "What? Would you guys all have pants on? What's going on?" No, that's a different book.
No, it's funny you bring that up. There are natural hot springs in the Sierra.
Oh,
and
okay.
There is a scene where Gil, who, even though he's a swimmer, has never really gotten naked in mixed company and is very uncomfortable with that at the beginning. But that's what everyone's doing in the hot springs. It's pretty typical. And so, there are a couple of scenes. In fact, it's funny in the book, because every time Gil goes to take a shower or wash off or get naked, somebody always comes along, and he's like, he's freaked out by this, at first. But the story is really to get somebody who has never experienced backpacking, who would look at it and go, why the heck would I do that? The bugs and the bears and the dirt, and see it through Gil's eyes and see he goes through a transformation out here, and he comes to love it. And of course, I won't say what happens with Sid, and I won't give any spoilers, but
they have to eat him before the hike is over. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm sorry.
There are.
I make the lowest common denominator joke possible.
Right. It's not the Donner Party, James.
Okay, that's right. So, and that's when I listen to a lot of podcasts, and there's one that I think it's the last podcast on the left, and in their trailer reel, it's like, and that's when the cannibalism started. And it's just that's from the Donner episode. It's just like, and you listen to the podcast and you're just waiting for them to drop that line in that one. But in your novel, hope not quite that dark of a story.
No, not at all.
So the novel itself, it's you said the goal of it was to kind of introduce people to the world of hiking, and why in the world someone would venture into the world of hiking.
Yeah, that's one of the objectives. I wrote the novel after I took my first trip on the JMT. I'd done, 25, 30 years of backpacking prior to the JMT. I'd done a lot of long distance hikes, but I'd never gone for a month. And I'd never gone through such spectacular country where you really don't touch a road. I mean, we talked about food, and there are a couple of places out there where you stop and you mail yourself a bucket of food and you pick it up. Not a lot, though, but you there's only one place where there's a road, and you don't even have to cross it. You kind of see it. It's a remote road, out at Red's Meadow, and you're back in the woods. So it was a 28-day trip away from civilization, up in scenery like I've got behind me.
So not real great cell service there, right?
None at all. No cell service.
Oh, wow.
And that's a blessing of sorts.
Yes.
You disconnect from all that craziness. So I got back, and I couldn't get the trail out of my head. I mean, I'd done so much backpacking, but this was on such another level and so beautiful. And it really changed me in a lot of ways. And I wanted to share that experience. I wanted to share that story. And I was scheduled to give a lecture at my college, about the JMT. And I started to research the history and the background. I had never done that prior to the hike. And it was really interesting. And I was all excited, and the lecture got canceled. Best cancellation that's ever happened to me, because I realized I have a book here. I have enough information and enough stuff that I could write a history book, but who's going to read the history of the John Muir Trail? That's right. That's not going to be a popular book. And there were so many people interested in this who want to hike. So I thought, why not write a book that shows people why I love doing this, the beautiful scenery, the spectacular wilderness, and how nature changes you, right? How people, in modern society, it's so stressful. You're so busy. You don't have time for reflection. And you get out here in the wilderness, and you really, really have time to reflect and experience, and it changes you. So I wanted to convey the history. I wanted to convey this, and I thought, I'm going to put it into a novel. So I spent 5 years writing a novel, and it's doing great. It's out on, I think it's an Amazon bestseller now. It's been reviewed by Kirkus and Midwest Books, and it made Christopher Townsend, the editor of The Great Outdoors, top 15 books of 2021.
Nice.
It's been doing pretty darn well. So I hope your listeners check it out. And we have an audiobook now too, which is
okay. Do you narrate the audiobook?
No, I don't. There are so many.
You got a nice voice. You could. I wouldn't mind hearing. I wouldn't mind listening to you tell your story. I'm enjoying listening to you tell this story now. But you tag somebody else in on the voiceover on that?
Well, thanks for the compliment, Jamie. I've had a lot of people say I should be on the radio, but
you got a face for it.
Wow, that's good. Then
I'm just
so no TV
again. If it's a lowbrow joke, I got it in my back pocket, ready to shoot.
I love it. If it were a nonfiction story, if it were a memoir, or mostly about, if it were a manual or something, I would narrate it.
Yeah.
But there are over 50 characters in this story.
Oh, okay.
There are male and female voices. Yeah. There's just too many people, and I needed a professional. So we got a wonderful narrator, Jake Hunsbuscher. We interviewed 50 different people for this. And he was just fantastic. And so he does all those voices. He really puts the emotion into the characters. And I mean, I've got to say, he did an amazing job with the audiobook. It adds a dimension to the story that wasn't there before. So I loved the audio version. I was shocked how engrossed I got listening to it. And, and I'd read the book.
And you know what's coming.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So you just say adding another dimension to it on the website. I noticed that there's illustrations. These are illustrations out of the book. You had someone illustrate some things to add some interest to the book.
Yeah. So
tell us about, how did you connect with your illustrator, and what did they bring to life for you?
So Jeremy Ashcroft is the illustrator on the book. He's a very famous mountain illustrator from the United Kingdom. He's done a lot of mountaineering and mountain climbing, and he's very active in the Facebook John Muir Trail group. So I've seen his stuff quite a bit, and I approached him about doing illustrations because have you read some of those, like growing up, like Treasure Island or something, where you get these illustrated books, right? They have the picture of the pirate and, the island and stuff. And I remember growing up, I would spend hours staring at Skull Island and looking at the map and going, ooh, I want to find hidden treasure, and making my own treasure maps, and like Lord of the Rings, same thing, right?
Yeah.
Just stare at those maps. And I wanted that kind of feeling in this book. I wanted it to have sort of that classic feeling. And for readers who, I didn't want topo maps. I didn't want something that the reader would be challenged to look at. So I had Jeremy do 3-dimensional drawings of each day's hike. So a reader who wants to look at it can go, oh, that's what that pass looks like, or that's what that mountain, and really visualize it day by day. And then he did sketches of some of the lakes and, like the Muir Hut and the Whitney Hut, and there's a rock monster on the trail. And so I had him sketch these things so the reader can kind of visualize them that way too. So he did a whole bunch of sketches. The hardback and the paperback are both illustrated. Cool. And the cover art, the cover is a picture of the Muir Hut. That was done by Faith Rum, who's a Yosemite artist. We're still on there?
Yeah. Is that the cover? I was just trying to bring up the cover.
I see. Yeah, the cover was done by Faith Rum. She's a Yosemite artist. She used to be both an interpretive and a wilderness ranger. And she does, many of the listeners have probably seen her work. She does a lot of interpretive signs for the Forest Service and the park. Okay. So, if you go to Mono Lake and you see, the life cycle of the shrimp or something, those drawings are hers. So she's very well known too. And being an animal show, I'm sure your listeners and viewers have seen that stuff.
Yeah. So is the nickname Poe, right? Is that your nickname? What's that? Should I call you Poe? Should I be calling you Ethan? Should we change the name?
Call me Poe. Everybody on trail does if they know me. Poe is the name of Kung Fu Panda, right?
Oh, yeah.
You remember the show. Uh-huh. I got everybody on trail. There we go. when you're on trail, you get a trail name. People name you for something. And for me, I lived in China for about 5 years. I speak Chinese. I like martial arts. I'm kind of big, like a bear, or like a panda bear. I'm kind of sweet, I suppose. So, somebody suggested, hey, you could be like that Kung Fu Panda guy, Poe, and Poe just stuck, So my trail name's Poe. And actually in the book, Gil gets named Poe much the same way I did. So I give the name to him, but it has deeper meaning in the book. In the book, it comes to have another meaning as well. But I don't want to give any spoilers.
No spoilers.
You asked me about bears. I do have.
So I was going to ask about your bear. What was the most harrowing bear encounter, or the sweetest bear encounter?
I think there are two three that stand out. One that I used in the book. So I'm not going to talk about that one because if you read the book, it would be a spoiler. Mm-hmm. But one of the most interesting ones, I was on the High Sierra Trail.
Spoiler, you're still alive, so.
I survived.
You survived. Okay, that's a spoiler.
Anyone who's wondering, if you read the trail and you get to that scene where Gil first encounters a bear, and you're wondering, is that real? Yes, that was a true story. That happened to me. That was me. I was on the this is a different encounter though. I was on the High Sierra Trail, which goes across the Sierra and the other way. It goes from Sequoia Park in the big trees out to Whitney. So it's like a mini JMT. People who wanted to get in the Sierra but only had 10 days, that would be the one to do. Yeah. And it's easier to get the permits also. So I just left Crescent Meadow and was heading to Bear Paw. And I was hiking with this young Japanese woman who had never really backpacked much, but was planning to do the JMT and start from Crescent Meadow. And we got to this section of trail where it kind of runs between two cliffs. On your left, there's sort of a vertical cliff rising up, and on your right, it kind of drops down. And it's a narrow section of trail, and it runs, 100 yards along this narrow path where there's really no way to go left or right. And we got about halfway out, and this big black bear comes lumbering towards us. And, there's nowhere to go. You can only go straight or back. And the bear looks at us and just starts approaching. It's not hesitating. It's not turning around. So, the Japanese woman was like, what do we do? And, I pulled out my iPhone because I wanted to get a little, video here. So one hand I'm holding the phone, but in my other hand, I take my trekking pole, I'm making myself tall and I start yelling, and the bear was having nothing of it. He looked at me like, oh man, you got to be kidding, and he was he like one of these older tired bears. He just gave me this eye like, no, I'm not going all the way back there. I'm going to keep going. So he looked at me, paused, and started walking again. And I'm like, oh God, and you should have seen the woman I was with. But I just started yelling again, and the bear paused. He looked at me. He looked behind him. He looked at me. He looked behind him. He looked at me again and started lumbering towards me. And I'm like, So I really start jumping around. This is where I put the phone away. I started jumping and making noise. And finally, this bear looks at me and goes, oh, God, all right. Turns around and walks back and then goes down and around us down the cliff. And, it was I don't know, it was probably just 2-3 minutes, but it was like, whoa, okay, this was close because we had nowhere to go. We couldn't, if we turned around and ran or went back, that bear would be on us. It's a tight situation. So, the Japanese woman was so funny. She was like, is this normal? I'm like, well, sometimes, and the next day she packed up, she said, oh, my foot hurts. And she hiked out. And I'm like, I think it was the bear. I don't know. Maybe it was her foot, but I think she got freaked out. But it happens. I'm
freaked out here in the story.
No, I mean,
and I grew up in Detroit.
Well, it's different. Well, maybe not. Detroit can be pretty serious.
Yeah.
I think for me, the scariest bear encounter though was in Tehipite. I was solo hiking. I was in this remote valley. Tehipite is one of the most remote valleys in the Sierra. Really hard to get to. I'd set up my tent, and it was similar to this tent here. It's a trekking pole tent, and you have to stake it out. If you pull the stakes out, the tent collapses. And I was sleeping. It was midnight. I knew there was bear around. I shouldn't have been camping there. I mean, there was bear sign everywhere. There were tracks. There was bear poop. I mean, I knew I was in bear territory. Yeah. And at night, at midnight, the tent falls down on me. Oh. And I can sense, the movement of something outside. This bear, presumably, it circled the tent, knocked out 2 of the different stakes, and collapsed the tent on me. I don't know if it intended to, but bears are pretty smart. Yeah. I emerged, as you were asking earlier, naked or almost naked, and was like, yelling at the bear. And I think I heard something off in the bush, but I think it was just telling me, hey, this is my home. And I didn't sleep the rest of the night.
No.
It's like every little noise you're listening to, particularly when you're alone. But that was perhaps the most frightening because it had approached the tent and circled the tent. And, and I was in its territory. I knew that. But I'd hiked 15 miles that day, and I really did not want to look for another spot.
So, and that was going to be a question, is like on average or a typical day, or does it depend on the terrain? How far do you travel on any given day over the 28, 30 day adventure?
Sure. So on the JMT, when I did that, and I've done the JMT a couple of times, but when I did it the first time, I was doing 7 to 8 miles a day average. So I wasn't putting in that many miles. But remember, as I said, I'd overpacked. I was carrying 55 pounds going in that time. And, you're going over these big mountain passes. Sometimes you're up at 12, 13,000 feet. So the air is thin. It's tough. Okay. The average hiker, though, does about 12 miles a day over that terrain. And the
average good hiker.
Well, yeah, I'd say so. But
I don't know if I'd make 12 miles a day.
7 to 8 is very comfortable. I like 7 to 8 through the Sierra. but it depends on how much time you've got, your physical conditioning, and how much food you've got, So I like the relaxed pace, but there are people who love running, and it just depends on you.
So you said something earlier about the smaller trail and then that trail as well, and you said you had to get a permit. So do you have to? What is this? What's the permit? Do they check you out and you're like, wow, you got a peg leg. You're not going to be able to do this. You can't. Is there some sort of vetting process to say you shouldn't be out on this trail or you can? What's this permit you mentioned?
No, there's no real vetting process. Anybody
okay,
who
if you're
wants
dumb enough to go, you can go.
Well, yeah, and hopefully people who have no experience don't clog up the permit system. I'd never tell anybody who's never been backpacking just to jump on the JMT. It's a little bit too much of a thing.
It's a challenge.
Yeah, I would suggest anybody who's never backpacked, do a weekend trip, do a 3-day trip, do some shorter stuff up in the Sierra. Maybe this Ray Lakes loop behind me, that's a week-long trip. It's a nice trip. And that way you're not clogging up the system for somebody with the experience who's really ready to do the JMT, because the permits are limited for some of these big hikes. And there are lotteries. I mean, right now, while you guys are shoveling snow, there are people who are getting online at 7 every morning trying to get a permit for some of these trails for the summer. So, they put them out 6 months in advance.
So do they do that? So it's just, to protect to protect the environment and just not to have too many people trampling through. Is that the
exactly?
Okay.
You want to keep a wilderness experience. You don't want it to be a zoo. And demand, particularly after COVID, has grown. So and for permits, some of these trails, they're easy to get. You can go online and just get a basic one. The JMT is very tough. There's a lot of discussion about how to get the permit because there's so much demand for it. But once you have the permit, you'll meet with the rangers and they'll go over the rules. They'll tell you about, how to bury your waste and how far away from water you need to be, and, all what to do with a bear, all the different basics of the wilderness they'll go over with you, the fire restrictions and all that. So it's a vetting process in the sense that you're told the rules, and then people out in the wilderness will check your permits. You'll run into rangers, and if you don't have one, you're in a lot of trouble. But basically, as long as you're following the rules, everyone's happy, and they're there to protect the wilderness.
Okay. All right.
And each other.
Yeah. So was this your first novel, The Trail, a novel? Is that your first, was that your first book?
Not my first book, but my first novel. I have a chemistry textbook I'm a co-author on, and that's got my writing
party
team.
Guy.
Yeah, chemistry. Oh, everybody's going to go and read that, right? But this was my first fiction attempt, and it took me quite a while to learn to write this. I mean, to shift gears into fiction writing was not simple.
So, but this was more of just a passion project, a pleasure, a hobby thing that you did because you got your gig as a chemistry professor, paying the bills, and so it was kind of is that how you describe it?
Absolutely. This has been a work of love, a work of passion. I wanted to share sort of the other things in my life that I love with people, and it's doing well. People have really resonated with the book, and I think it reaches a broader audience. There's a lot in it about philosophy, about life and death, of course, the cancer issues, and what is the meaning of life? I think sometimes we're so caught up in the city with our busy schedules and our phones that we just don't have time to reflect. What is my purpose? What am I really doing? Do I really like what I'm doing?
Yeah. And
when you're on trail, you have all the time in the world to think about these things. And you really go through a process of self-reflection. I like to play on the words that recreation is recreation. You have time to recreate yourself and really understand what is your place in the greater world. So I bring out a lot of that spiritual element in the book too.
Awesome. So you have, is there another book in the works? Do you have another novel in you? Is this something I did this, I shared this story, or is it like I'm kind of bit by this bug? I want to do more. I got another idea. What do you got?
Oh, definitely. I want to keep writing.
You've been bit. You're in it.
After the Chem book, I just realized I've got a passion for writing, and
okay.
I think yeah, for sure, I'll have another novel or two as we go along.
Very cool. Hopefully they're as successful as this one is, because you can find it. The Trail. What's the proper title? Trail, a novel?
Yeah, or just The Trail. If you put it into Google or any of the online bookstores, it comes up. If it doesn't,
bestseller on Amazon, so probably will pop up for you.
Yeah, it'll hit the top of the Amazon list for sure.
Awesome. Awesome.
I hope people though will go to their local bookstores. I think we need more support for those. So
yes,
you can also order it through them, and if they don't have it, the distributor is Ingram Books. Okay. So if you just tell them The Trail by Ethan Gallogly and Ingram Books, they'll know how to find it.
Awesome. Ethan, so you got some websites. You have your LinkedIn, and you got your website, and so where can people get a hold of you?
EthanGallogly.com. So is that...
That's where I stole all those little pictures from.
Yeah, there you go.
So, it looks very similar to this.
You just type myname.com, it comes right up, and I've got all my links and stuff right.
I'll link it in the description as well. So, Ethan, I appreciate you tolerating my sophomoric humor, and I appreciate you sharing your story. Yay! Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. I've really enjoyed being here, and I hope you get up into the Sierra and get to check out some of the scenery yourself. I do. I got to get out of the city from the car.
I do. So because we're here in Michigan, right? And so we got the UP, and it's a little bit more bear country up in the UP, and there's these gorgeous falls, some of the biggest falls, the Tequananum Falls. And we're staying at the just a state campground. I'm more of a state campground, that has Wi-Fi and the outhouses. I'm not. I don't know. I'm not 30 days on. I'm not a 30-day on a. I could do a weekend. Maybe
come
5
check
days.
out Yosemite Valley. Yosemite Valley's got all that. There's a Starbucks and a pizza place, but yet you're surrounded by the mountains and the Sierra.
Exactly. That's a bit more my speed. But so we're camping. We're in a tent, and I do journalism. I do high school journalism, and so I fancy myself an amateur photographer, and I'm like, I'm gonna get some great shots. Sunrise, over by the falls, so I'm going to go over to the falls. I'm going to get some early morning, those golden hour photos. And so I go and I drive, and I'm like, anybody want to come to the falls with? Everybody's out cold. And they're like, no, shut up. And so I grab my cameras and I go, and it's probably 3, 4, 5 miles to the falls from the campsite. And I'm there and I go to shoot it, and I'm like, oh yeah, the sun's coming up, but the trees are like, and so there's no sunrise to catch because you're in the middle of these forests, and the trees are taking it all up. I'm like, crap. So I get some decent shots, and I start driving back to the campsite, and side of the road, there's a bear, and I'm like, oh my God, it's just kind of screwing around on the side of the road. I think there was some trash. It was like rifling through, somebody threw some trash out. And as I got closer, it was a cub. And so I rolled down the window like halfway, and I was taking some pictures. I got some great, and it like crossed the road and it went back and forth, and a little black bear. I think it was just nothing big. And I'm like, oh, that was so cool. But it was a cub, and Mom probably was not far away, and I knew enough not to get out of the car. So,
right. You don't go and give it a peanut butter sandwich or something.
Yeah. Oh. Who needs a hug, right? So that probably wouldn't turn out well. So, but I love being in nature, but I don't know if I could do 30 days on on the trail. I don't know if I got it in me.
It's not for everybody, but if you read the book, you'll see what the benefits are. And you were talking about bear cubs. The problem with the cubs when you're out in the wilderness is, in the old days, we used to hang our food. We didn't have bear cans. You'd actually have to hang it from a tree, and you're supposed to hang it high enough and far enough out that the bears wouldn't go out there. But
Yeah.
Mama Bear was smart. She'd send the cubs,
Ah.
and the cubs would be able to go out on the branch. They climb better. And, you'd wake up in the middle of the night hearing this commotion. And I had many sleepless nights just having to go out and chase away the bears. And it was always the cubs. And you don't want to chase the cubs because mom will get mad,
Oh,
so
yeah.
it's a lot better now with the canisters.
Fair play. All right, Ethan. Looking forward to diving deeper into the book, and when you get the next one up, we'll hang out again.
Great. It's been a pleasure being here, Jamie. And check out the audiobook. I think you and your listeners will like that better. And that's up on Audible.
Awesome. All right. Thanks again, Ethan.
Thank you.
All right. Be well.